welcome everyone. We're really excited to be partnering with Restless on this event, and we hope we can bring value and support to the community today and in the future, of course, as well. But today we're going to talk about a subject and a topic that impacts so many people across the UK, and that's balancing personal life with work and then the increasing demands of care for a loved one, or even just balancing personal life and care. So whether you're an informal, unpaid carer to an elderly or disabled loved one, have a relative with a long-term illness, or just a working parent, we hope that today can offer some interesting discussion, helpful guidance, or just some solace in knowing that you're not alone in the struggles of trying to kind of balance all the challenges that come with caregiving and parenthood. So without kind of further ado, my name is John. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Companiions. I'm a married father of two amazing but very challenging children. And my first confession of the evening is that I've actually moved my office sofa to block the door of my office. So I've barricaded myself in to keep my children out. So that's probably not the best tip on parenting, and I'm sure you'll get a lot better from our panel, but an admission nevertheless. But I'm joined by an amazing panel of guests today that will introduce themselves now. I'm going to pass over to Lisa to go next, and then Lisa will pass over from there. So please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your life and work. You're on mute, Lisa. Oh, you're still on mute.
Sorry.
No worries.
The classic. Thank you very much, Restless, for having us today. It's lovely to see so many people here and to have such a great panel to chat this over with. My name is Lisa Robinson. I'm the CEO and founder of Companiions, and I'm looking forward to having this debate with everybody today. I'll introduce you to Fiona.
Sorry, do you want me to go next?
Yeah, please.
So I'm recent director at Amazon, where I used to drive a lot of their diversity, and a very recent author of 2 Mirrors and a Cheetah. Crazy book for a crazy person, but it's all about trying to be yourself. So it's very topical for fitting in the whole picture of who we are and not just the working piece, because we are the mums, the carers, etc. And my personal experience is, yes, I'm a leader. I have 2 kids. My husband, he does a lot of the workload, but we move around a lot, and so we don't always have the support network. And my mum, when I grew up, had to look after all 5 of my sisters and I, because my dad was long-term ill. So I've seen it from different angles, passionate about changing something in this space. And thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant. Dorothy?
Hi everybody, I'm Dorothy Cook. Thank you for having me, Companiions and Restless. I'm very honoured to be here tonight. Yes, I'm married, been married 48 years to my husband, Melvin Cook. We met when I was a young teenager, had 1 child early on, and have got 3 fairly grown-up grandchildren now. So I'm the youngest of 10 children. My mum had 10, believe it or not, 5 boys, 5 girls, and I'm the youngest of the 10. And I don't know how she did it, but she's a strong woman, and I think I get some strength from her. Yeah, I've had a varied career. I've always tried to juggle my son and my career and a balance of life and aging parents, but they're both past now. And then just when I thought things were getting a little bit easier and they'd grown up and I set up my own business, my husband became seriously ill with a terminal rare brain condition. So I struggled to carry on running my business until it reached a tipping point. I had to give up, and now I'm his full-time carer.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dorothy. And is Eleanor with us, or is she running late?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, Eleanor, fantastic.
Sorry, I had serious tech issues. I was sitting in a waiting room on another on another call. I would have been sitting there forever.
No,
so I'm glad you started a bit late. Yeah, hi. So I'm Eleanor Mills. I am the founder and editor-in-chief of a new platform for women in midlife called Noon, as in the middle of the day. And we are all about helping women through the pinch points that come at this stages in our life, and a lot of that can be to do with caring responsibilities. The average age of a carer in the UK is 49, and that also coincides with the time when we see a real exodus of a lot of women from the workforce, particularly from corporates. I mean, talking to Fiona and Lisa, both here, both coming out at that point. I was at the Sunday Times for 25 years, and I left my job when I was 49. And I think that what hits a lot of women at this point is what we call the midlife maelstrom, a whole load of different things: divorce, redundancy, bereavement, caring for teenagers and elderly parents, often simultaneously, problems with our own health and issues. And often I think can be a kind of caring crisis, which forces women to leave a kind of job, or to give up on a career that they've had for a long time, just because it seems completely impossible to square the circle when it comes to caring responsibilities. I've got 2 daughters, one now at university, one still at school doing her A-levels, and I worked all the way through both of my pregnancies, doing a job which involved being there till 2 in the morning every Friday, doing a kind of 16-18 hour day regularly. So I really know what it's like to be at the sharp end of deadlines, and also to have caring responsibilities. I could never have done it without my husband, but I also have a lot of friends who are single parents, and that's when it really bites, because there isn't anybody else. So I love Lisa's idea of being able to kind of have a service where you could get a kind of nice, friendly person to be there when you couldn't. Of course, it's not the same necessarily as being there yourself. And as my mum always used to say to us, the only people that we're truly irreplaceable to are our family. She always used to say the graveyards are full of very important executives, editors, politicians, and that really the people who need you are your family more. But I do think it's really important that there are more flexible kinds of options and people that one can call on in an emergency, particularly since many of us now don't live near our families who might have stepped in to do that in the past. And of course now often, because of women having children later, the kind of twin sandwich pincer movement of both your parents coming to bits and your teenagers maybe really needing you. And I was sitting next to someone at lunch today who's I was at an International Women's Day lunch, and the woman next to me was 53, and she had a 7-year-old. So it's also often still at this point quite young children and elderly parents. She had 2 parents with dementia, and she had just left a big job, in fact, because she just couldn't do it. So I think this is a very real issue, and it's one of the kind of things which is not talked about by women often in the workplace, but is a really kind of crucial point. Everyone thinks it's about having young children and when you come back from maternity leave, but actually it's quite easy to find somebody nice to feed gloop into your baby and kind of give it a hug. It's actually much harder to find somebody else who can look after a parent with dementia or a teenager who really needs you. So I think
absolutely,
it's a good initiative.
Brilliant, and yeah, all fantastic points that we look forward to diving deeper into during the panel discussion. Thank you, Eleanor, that was amazing, and thank you everyone on the panel for being here and taking the time out of your insane schedules to be with us today, especially at this time. And in terms of context for the agenda of the day, we'll be breaking the subject matter down into 3 kind of key categories, and they're the panel's kind of personal experiences of caregiving. We'll then move on to the burden of care on women, and finally the kind of the side where we talk about employers and businesses and what more they can do. We'll try and stick roughly to 10 minutes per each subject and leave time for questions potentially at the end or during, but it's my kind of unenviable task to keep everyone on track, so do wish me luck. And before we go into the panel discussion, people might be wondering who and what is Companiions. So we've prepared a short introduction that I'll fly through now. But Companiions is a mobile app that was set up by Lisa, and it's designed to connect people that require a little bit of extra help, support and companionship, either for themselves or their loved ones, with local people in their community, kind, compassionate people that are able and willing to provide that help, and really bringing health care into this side of healthcare into the modern world with new technology, but maintaining the kind of in-person requirement that gives people so much back. And our vision is to bring companionship to every community globally, not just in the UK. This is a challenge and a solution that we feel is viable and relevant for the whole of the world, and we have big ambitions to be a global business. And our purpose is to make companionship easy, safe and convenient. It's really as simple as that, because we know that there's a problem. We launched the business in 2020. It does provide that kind of simple, trusted way for people to arrange in-person, on-demand support, and we're a purpose-led business. We were born from our founder Lisa's own challenges in getting these kind of services for her loved ones, and every employee within Companions has their own personal experience, so we really do try to kind of live the brand in that sense. And ultimately we're seeing a challenge in today's society. The elderly population is growing, we're all living for longer, but loneliness is increasing, and the current care provision really doesn't address the needs of many people. And this has given rise to a requirement for a new category of care, less focused on medical support and more on company, friendship and help and support and the everyday assistance that we try to provide. And this is a service like any other, one that people are willing to pay a fair and transparent rate for, to support themselves and their loved ones to live a better quality of life. I think back to when my grandfather moved to our family home at the age of 92 from Ireland. He wasn't in need of any medical care. He was very articulate, very well read, very funny man, but he was alone all day while we were out at work, and he just needed somebody to check in on him and make a healthy meal for him and just have a conversation. So that's kind of my own personal story, but it's not just elderly people. We have many customers who come to us with younger children who are suffering from loneliness or have an illness that makes it difficult for them to socialize and make friends, and it's important to have a companion with them to really give their family support and bridge the gap to get them into the community and do the things that they enjoy living and live a happy life and a happier life. So that kind of touches on one of the things that we're seeing from our partner, the Retail Trust, who are a care group or a residential home group across the UK. And they mentioned to us that over 60% of residents within the Retail Trust in Glasgow alone don't actually require medical care. They just want a friendly face and someone to help. And it's definitely something that we're seeing from speaking to our customers every single day. And the solution that we're looking to provide through our kind of purpose-led business, which was born from a genuine challenge, is to build a community. We have over 4,000 kind, compassionate people that want to make a difference in the lives of those living in their communities. And we believe that we can expand the pool that provide that kind of support to complement the amazing work that medical and professional carers do. And we know that there is, challenges within that space in terms of, vacancies, but many of those people that they're supporting may just need that companionship element of care rather than medical care. Everything that we do is done through an app or through our app, where customers can access, vetted, rated and reviewed companion profiles to make bookings for their loved ones or themselves quickly and easily, with safe payments and no cash exchanged. And what we try to do is strip all of the complexity out. We don't have any service fees, no monthly retainer fees. You just go onto the app, you sign up for free, and you're able to access compassionate people at a fair and transparent rate. We're very fortunate in the growth that we've had, be supported on our journey by some of the UK's most trusted news publications and charity partners that help us to raise awareness of our solution. And of course, now moving to the next chapter of really challenging UK employers and local authorities to do more to support their staff and the constituents in doing more for working carers and their constituents. And in going through this journey, we found the overwhelming majority of customers booking companions on behalf of their loved ones are either busy working professionals who just need some additional support or a helping hand around the house, as well as full-time unpaid carers who just need some respite. And that's someone, you know, Dorothy is a customer of ours that we'll talk about afterwards, that you know, really epitomizes that kind of situation. And that respite can come with, you know, recharge of the batteries, the ability to get out of the house, and then represents that time that they do then spend with their loved ones, making it easier and less stressful and better quality time together, perhaps. There are thousands of stats that we could have used in this part of the presentation to demonstrate the challenges working and unpaid carers are facing. Across the UK, the restriction in health and social care services have significantly increased the number of informal caregivers to about 13.6 million, up from 9.1 last year. And 1 in 7 of UK workers are also providing some form of care to a loved one. Many are doing it from a distance, but each on average are providing around 12 hours a week of unpaid care to a loved one. 12 hours. It's a long time when you factor in a busy full-time job, children, a house, and all the responsibilities that come with life in general. And trying to manage all of these things can lead to practical and mental and emotional challenges. And on the practical side, you can see things like having to take unpaid leave to look after a loved one, turning down a promotion, reducing work hours, or just, you know, struggling to concentrate at work. And on the kind of more emotional side, feelings of low mental well-being, being overwhelmed, anxious, and perhaps even feeling marginalised at work as well. So these are the things that we really want to address today with today's panel discussion. So thank you for waiting, guys. We'll jump straight into that now and end the presentation. And firstly, I'd love to go to you, Dorothy, as a Companions customer. We first met when you booked a companion for your husband, Melvin. Can you tell us a little bit more about your story as a full-time carer, and more recently, the impact of isolation on your own quality of life?
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, well, Melvin started to get poorly about 12 years ago. It came on gradually in later life. And it was just little signs at first, because he's got a rare brain disease, like he'd lose his balance, or, you know, he'd walk into a door and, you know, and we'd kind of go, what are you doing? Are you drunk? Or, you know, have you had a drink? We'd make a joke of it. But it started to become more and more of a problem. It actually took him 3 years to get a proper diagnosis of what was actually going on with him. And as I said, I ran my own business. I set up my own business and had been running that for about 25 years. A successful business. It took me all around the UK. So a bit like Eleanor, working silly 12, 16 hours a day. Melvin was also working at the same time. So it just started to increase and become a bit of a big problem. And he had to give up work in the end. And at first it affects his walking. He can't walk unaided. He can't speak properly. It affects swallowing. It's progressive, so it's never going to get better. It's just got worse over the years. And at first, I could manage to do my business and juggle it and Melvin, because he went from walking a bit unsteady to then walking with one stick, to then walking with 2 sticks, to now he's in the advanced stages. He's completely in a wheelchair and immobile. So it came on gradually. And I think just from a woman's perspective, I've just always thought, well, I can do it all, because that's what I've always done. I brought our son up. I've juggled life. I can do this, and I've been juggling my business, and I don't know how everybody on here feels tonight. I can only talk about my own personal experience, but I had my son quite young. So when I was working, all my other colleagues were career driven, hard driven people who didn't have children. So I was juggling childcare at the same time as his career, and they couldn't understand that. They wanted to know why I needed to leave the office at 6 o'clock one night because I needed to get home for my son. And so I've always felt that I can't share this burden of juggling my life and my caring role, because I felt that either the employer would frown upon it, whether that rightly or wrongly, that they wouldn't give me any leeway, that they think that I was just using it as an excuse. So when it comes to Melvin being ill, I didn't feel that I could share that with business or organizations, because I just thought the ethos is in hard driven careers is you do the job. And you get out there and you deliver the job, and your personal life is your personal life. So we didn't have much family. We've got a son who's also got 3 children and his own career. And I just felt that I couldn't turn to anybody or ask anybody to take, to give us a hand. And I always remember like jumping in the car when I'd done a day's work, and I might be, 30, 40 miles away, depending on where I was working, and looking at my clock and thinking, I've got to get home to him, And the pure stress of trying to get home to check that he was all right, that he was okay. But as time got on, unfortunately, and we had one unfortunate incident, where he had a bad fall when he was working in pool, and he had to give up work, and he was admitted to hospital, and I had to go to the Cotswolds to work. And I had that real dilemma of I needed to be with him, but I couldn't let the business down, because they were committed to a piece of business that they'd given to me. And that was the tipping point. That was the tipping point where I then said, I can no longer do a job of work and a carer. So I gave it up about 2 years ago, and become his full-time carer.
Yeah. And more recently, I suppose during COVID and lockdown, there'd been kind of cuts to your provision, and it kind of left you in a bad place from a kind of being isolated kind of perspective as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, from someone who's outgoing, very social, enjoys meeting people, love traveling, love doing my job, to I gave up 2 years ago, just pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and of course we had to shield. He had to be shielded. So we shielded for, till we got our vaccinations, basically. So that was 15 months where we couldn't have anybody come into the house. We couldn't allow people in, especially if they were unvaccinated, not because it, their personal choice, but just because he was so vulnerable. And consequently, I never saw anybody, and I couldn't even leave the house. It's going to sound really dramatic, and when I look back, I don't know how I got through it, but to go 15 months without being able to walk out your front door, I suppose personally what it did to me was probably leave me a little bit on the edge of being, what's it when you can't go out? What's the word I'm looking for, ladies?
Is it agoraphobia?
Yeah, a bit of agoraphobia. I was almost reaching that point. Very lonely, increasingly isolated, felt desperate. I was just in crisis mode, and then I got introduced to companions, and it was like, we're companions. I spoke to Lisa a few times, and this is what we do, and I loaded the app, and I've used the app, and I've booked a companion. And the first thing that I wanted to do when Lisa said, what is it you want the most from companions, I said somebody to come and sit in with him so I can get out. I was absolutely desperate to get out, and we booked a lovely companion, absolutely lovely. I felt I could trust her so much. I felt comfortable. because you don't really, you know, trust comes into this, Lisa. You know, you've got to trust who you leave your loved ones with, and you know, it's got to be on both sides, not just for me but for Melvin. And I just went out, and she came and sat with Melvin as a sitter, and I drove out to a really remote place, and where there was just trees and open air, and just took a breath and just breathed, and thought, wow, is this what the outside world is now like? And I've booked a few times, and you know, I've had companions, and yeah, I'd reached crisis points. The companions come in just at the right time when I was in crisis.
This is really lovely to hear and really appreciate, and I think, you know, everyone within our team was so kind of happy to kind of see your feedback, and just hearing it now, it's incredible to hear. So thank you very much. And actually, probably a nice segue on to you, Lisa. I know that you moved away from living close to your family in 2018, which, you know, left a real gap in the support that you were providing to your parents. And I'd love to hear more from you, and I'm sure the group would, about kind of that situation and what measures you took to find a solution at the time, as well as how that kind of left you and your family feeling.
Yeah, for sure. I can see somebody's put in the chat as well, employers seem to show more support for responsibilities than they do with those with elderly care responsibilities. And one of the challenges that I saw is I had my first child when I was 40 and one at 41, just at the time that my parents were approaching their 80s and went quite downhill quite quickly. So I had very, very young children and was hoping that I would, you know, get some help from, you know, my aging parents, but it didn't work out that way because I had them a bit later in life. So you really feel the pinch when you have elderly parents that you're very close to and younger children that you've got a real responsibility for, because you have to be there for them. You know, everybody knows what children are like. You have to be there with your eyes on them all the time. But one of our children was very sick. Seb, the one that I had when I was 40, he got very sick and was in and out of hospital all the time, which coincided when I went back to work. So he was 10 months old when I went back to work. And we made a really difficult decision in 2018 to leave the area we were living at, which was close to my family. So I would help out with my parents quite a lot, and so would my husband, and they obviously loved having the little kids around them, and go and move far away from them so that we could get fresher air to try and help Seb's asthma. And actually, what I didn't think, I was just very much focused on the children and focused on, you know, making sure I was doing my job, focused on the children. It didn't really stop to think about this selfishly in hindsight, that, you know, the impact that had on my parents and the rest of our family from my husband and I moving away was absolutely huge, because they felt very lonely. It was right before COVID, but, you know, we'd left a great big hole in their life, and they were too, they didn't want to make us feel bad about moving away from them. But every time that, you know, we used to be there, if they couldn't get their whatever, their iPhone or their Wi-Fi to work, or they couldn't reach something, or they, you know, they had leaves blocking a drain, Ralph, my husband, would be straight over, go and help them. You know, we just made their life a lot easier in that sense. So I felt a huge anxiety actually as they were getting older, just from not being there when they needed us anymore. So I started to look at all the different options of, you know, if we're not going to be there, can I get a carer to go in, even though we don't really need a carer? And actually that would probably be quite a difficult conversation to get, you know, to say to my dad, I've got a carer coming in, because he wouldn't agree that he would need one. So I started to look at the different options, and, you know, I just found it very expensive, to be quite honest. The average for a carer to go in, even though we didn't need a carer, we just needed a kind person, is £28 an hour. And that racks up very, very quickly if you've got somebody going in for 3 or 4 hours, for 3 or 4 hours a day, or whatever the case may be. I also found it really inconvenient. I didn't find it very easy to kind of get through the loopholes that you have to go through just to get somebody to go around there. And, you know, we're all busy, so you just want to use technology. You want an app to make it seamless. And that's what I just couldn't understand, why nobody had done it so far. And they'd done it. There was a couple in the market who had done it for carers. But what we're doing is making just somebody who was a nice person to go and check in on my family and kind of alleviate that pressure that we were feeling, and to make it affordable. So yeah, roll on 2019, a year later, I decided to do it myself, just because I had a bit of tech kind of background, and it was just a moment in time where you know, there wasn't really another option out there. And I was very lucky that the people who I knew in my network agreed foolishly to come and work with me. So we kind of all set it up together from the beginning. So it's been such a journey so far, but it's been great because people like Dorothy is now, you know, it's such a warm feeling to be able to help people in real time. And we're just getting bigger and bigger now. So you're helping people and getting these amazing stories of how, you know, people were really affecting their day-to-day lives. So yeah, I'm 100% glad that you know, I took the step back from corporate life to create companions, and it's been great because now I use it for my parents, which is very useful.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad too. And you know, I remember when we kind of first talked about the concept, and you know, I immediately thought of, you know, my grandfather and the, when you know, I can really relate to the idea about the complexity sometimes within arranging support and help for somebody. And you know, I remember different people coming every time and not knowing the key code for the lock, and the lever arch folder that we had at home with all of the invoices and paperwork, and just, you know, there has to be a better way, and thankfully you came up with it, so thanks for that. And thank you for sharing that with us. And Eleanor, I know that you kind of mentioned, or you touched on this, you know, as a super successful journalist working to incredibly tight deadlines in a super high pressure environment, but also as a mother, you must have, you know, encountered some difficult experiences in balancing work and care. So I'd love to hear, you know, if there is, you know, specific challenges that you wanted to share, but also kind of any tips that you might have for people that might be struggling, other than using companions, of course.
I think that the real horror when you're in that kind of squeeze of being under such pressure at work to kind of produce at a really kind of high level, and of course wanting to do the right thing by your children, or your, you know, or an elderly parent who's in trouble, it's just, you feel it makes you feel desperate. I mean, I really related to what Dorothy was saying about kind of getting in the car knowing you've got 40 miles to get back, and, you know, just being terrified about what you're going to find when you get there, or the fact that you kind of can't be there. And it's a kind of combination of the kind of the stress and the pressure that you're already getting from your employers, and then the kind of guilt that you're letting down the people that you love most. And I was, you know, I was lucky that I was well paid enough that I could have you know, nannies if I needed them, and that kind of thing. But one of the things that I did after I went back after my second child, I actually resigned, because I went back and I had such a horrible time. They were so nasty to me. Rather the same thing as Dorothy says about being in a very intensely kind of macho world, so you can't admit kind of what's going on at home. And I just went back and I just thought, this is not worth it. I just don't want to do this. And I went in and I resigned. And it was only at that point, it was a really interesting lesson actually around childcare, but also about one's own self-worth, which was, it was only when I went in and said, all right, I'm out of here, that I realized how much they actually needed me. And there was a kind of power switch, which went from me going, you know, thinking, I've just got to get out of here, I can't do it, and then going, no, you can't leave, you know, we actually really need you, we value you. And what came out of that was that my editor said that I could work at home on a Wednesday, and on a Sunday paper you didn't have a very long day on a Monday. So that actually made it possible for me to keep going, because it meant that at least one day a week I could be at the school gate and I had a bit of respite. But the only caveat was that when my boss called, it was like getting a call from, you know, from God or something. You had to be there to answer the phone when he rang up, because basically the whole of my kind of new life, which made it possible for me to be the mother I wanted to be and kind of go on doing the job that I loved, was that I had to be able to answer this call when he rang me on a Wednesday. And it didn't, you know, and it was absolutely, I mean, probably now I don't think anyone would stand for this. You just say, I can't take the call. But then I was so terrified that if I wasn't available when they needed to be, that I would then lose the privilege of being able to work at home on a Wednesday. This is in the days when that kind of flexible working was just really unheard of. That I had this thing where I was with my kids all day, but I was also supposed to be working, and it seemed crazy to have the nanny there all day when I was meant to be there so I could look after the kids. But at the same time, I had to be able to take this call when it came through. And it was one of those things where I would have given anything to be able to have somebody who was just around, who I wasn't having to pay kind of nanny rates, but who was there as an extra pair of hands. And I remember once this call coming through when I was in the car with both children, both of whom were crying, as small children often do. And I remember thinking, I'm going to have to do this. So I shut my kids in the car, yelling their heads off, and stood outside the car. I could see them both yelling inside while I had to take this call from my boss, because I knew that if I didn't take the call, then my kids were not, you know, that Wednesday, a lovely Wednesday when I took them to soft play and we actually kind of had quite a lot of time together, was going to disappear. And it's probably the bit of my parenting life of which I'm most ashamed. But it was one of those really, really terrible kind of pinch moments where it was really the lesser of two evils. So I really, really know about the pressure of trying to kind of serve two masters and it being impossible, and either you having to kind of load up on very expensive person to be there all the time and you didn't really need them, rather than having kind of somebody who was just around. And my mum used to occasionally come just be with me during the days to be that person. But I can totally see the use of the kind of companion service, and the more that I do as I'm now a founder, you know, like Lisa, in my 50s, and the more that I speak to our women within the Noon community, who are all kind of between 45 and 60, the more I hear these tales of women leaving their jobs because it just got unbearable. And it's usually a caring thing. I mean, there's been a lot of chat around menopause recently, but usually when you dig down into those stories, the reason why people leave is not usually menopause. It's a combination of menopause plus their mother coming to bits, or their teenage child getting OCD or some kind of terrible anxiety. And we've seen a lot of that in the pandemic. And then you get just that double squeeze and you just think, I can't, the stress becomes so bad that you just can't keep going. So I think that it's not surprising to me that a working mum of a kind of sandwich situation has come up with this. And I think it's really long overdue, because the other ways of getting nannies or getting care are really cumbersome and very expensive, and you don't know what you're getting. And just I never felt comfortable with just kind of getting a babysitter off the app, because I was kind of worried that they wouldn't be CRB checked or all those kind of things. So I think the idea that you're getting a sentient human being who's been checked and has kind of come through a bit of a community is a really good idea.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's really helpful. And it actually, you know, your situation there kind of, I've experienced the I suppose the opposite, you know, where actually, and this is where I'd like to bring Fiona in, because I actually worked for Fiona when COVID first happened. And I can remember how, you know, no one knew what to do. And she was so quick to move and so incredibly supportive of everyone within the organisation. We would have Monday and Friday calls with everyone, and just the small things of bring your kids with you. If you're struggling on a Friday afternoon or a Monday morning and you haven't brushed their teeth yet, you haven't given them breakfast, and we would sit on this call of, you know, 150 people with 2-year-olds on their laps, and it, you know, obviously it wasn't a complete solution and nowhere near to the degree that you're talking about, Eleanor, but just those small kind of things, I think, provide that kind of open space for people to be able to address the situation. And, you know, Fiona, there's, you know, many factors that contribute towards inequality in the workspace and in society at large, but, you know, the imbalance in the burden of care feels like a significant and growing problem for both older and younger women that's really been accelerated and frankly exacerbated by COVID. So I'd really love to hear your experience and your perspective on this as a kind of champion within the D&I space and having done that for so long at Amazon.
Yeah, I'm glad we still have fond memories of those crazy early days. I think that the point is, from my side, in that moment, I was the leader and I've always promised to do stuff the way it is. I never sugarcoat stuff. And that was a moment where my words were put to their test, because I was also a mum at home, and it was important that I didn't present an image of having it all sorted. And so the meeting that John's talking about there, I essentially had my kids in the meetings, but they were under the desk rather than sort of coming in and out. And then they decided to sort of pop up and take part in something on a Friday morning. And so rather than, you know, go shh, I was like, okay, folks, my kids are here, they're going to join in. And then at that moment, everybody else turned on their screens, and there were people with kids too, but people hadn't felt they were able to say, hey, my kids are here and we're all busy, shush, shush, rather than accepting that this was going on. And that's sort of really a sort of magnified moment of probably what goes on a lot of the time. You know, people have got other things outside of work, but we tend to draw this line of this is work and this is personal. And COVID's made that so much more okay to say, look, it's not okay, or these are the other things I have on my plate, and therefore the full person gets taken into account. But of course, we're a long way from having everything sorted out to be able to deal with that. But if I look at the pandemic, and we know from the statistics, I think the British Medical Journal said that women, many more took on unpaid work than men. Many more women during the pandemic actually lost their jobs. And so the pandemic swung a disproportion of the inequality which was already there, which is why it makes it so much more important to actually say, okay, if women are naturally or unnaturally picking up this burden, how do you do something about it? And I think it really comes down to also making the most of this newfound flexibility which we have. So in those crazy pandemics moments, there was nobody said we didn't have flexibility. We were all at home doing the working from home that was never supposedly possible. And all we basically did together, everybody, was let people see that that could happen. So whilst it got worse for everybody, it forced everybody, on the other hand, into the, yes, we can do it. So you see both extremes were available in the pandemic, and it's left for employers now to say, okay, we didn't set it up like that, but we've proven the flexibility, and we still have a disproportionate, you know, amount of people suffering. So what do you do with it? And you know, whether it's Amazon or other larger companies, it really starts to tie into what everybody's doing on inclusion anyway, in sort of hopefully creating leaders with empathy who connect with people to find out if Sheila from, you know, Department X has any extra needs. So it's not that, you know, Sheila from Department X feels that it's an issue and can't bring it to the table that she has extra caring, etc., which has quite often been the issue, because women, as I'm hearing strong people on the panel here, you know, Lisa, a fabulous job. I take my hat off to you. Not only did you have that challenge, but you quickly created a company whilst multitasking like crazy. And women don't always say, hey, I've got too much on my plate. And so trying to find ways as the leader or the manager to understand if there is an extra challenge has to be sort of number one thing. And then secondarily, how do companies gradually start to have things like policies that can deal with it in the same way that we're seeing an increasing amount of companies do parental policies for, you know, both sides of the family. So it's going to take time, but if we don't talk about it and get people to bring forward that it is a challenge, that they have this without any shame or repercussions, and sort of socialize it a bit more, companies aren't going to start seeing it large enough to then change policies. So that's a long-winded route around the question you asked me there, because there's so many dimensions to this, John. But yeah.
No, it's a really great and interesting answer, and you know, something we could probably talk about all night and on another kind of event. But I suppose you know, you touched on a really important point, which is actually talking about it and giving employees, and particularly women, the ability and a voice within their organizations to articulate the challenges they might be facing. And it's great that you see improvements within parenting, but I think, you know, to the individual, the contributors' question within the chat, there's perhaps not enough going on for people that are looking after elderly relatives, or, you know, long-term sickness of their spouse, for example, and those kind of things. And from an employee benefits perspective, it's great that the conversation starts, but from a practical sports perspective, as a leader, and previously at Amazon, when that kind of situation comes up, did you feel like HR do enough to support the employees in those situations? Do you feel like there should be provisions like companions available within that space? And I'd kind of probably, you know, ask you that question, but I can see nodding and shaking of heads on the panel as well. So I'd love to kind of move to Dorothy and Eleanor afterwards.
Yeah, I think, I mean, whether it is companions or, you know, just something like that, I think if you're going to start including stuff like parenting, you know, mental health, right, is another facet of diversity that needs tackling. And as businesses tackling diversity as a start point holistically, these things fit in, and you can't just decide to, you know, exclude some stuff. But there's a fine balance between offering something like an employee benefit, which might be lovely, just like extra days holidays are, whereas maternity and parental leave falls under policy. So there is a job to be done of deciding how do we businesses tackle it and actually, you know, treat people fairly, so things aren't seen as a disadvantage versus, you know, a nice sort of benefit, and you can question how to deal with it. But undoubtedly, if we don't tackle it as companies, you can't really say you're really including everybody. And it's a big piece of inclusion, as I say, about bringing your whole self to work, needs the safe spaces to talk about these things without feeling you have to hide stuff and be a completely different person at work because you don't want to, you know, hold it together emotionally or whatever because of these pressures. And increasingly employers are going to be, I think, held responsible or have a bigger role in making sure the mental health of their employees is top of the list. And this is a piece of that. We know that this psychological distress, as it were, is higher when women have more unpaid, let's call it unpaid work, because that's what it is at the end of the day. And that's what needs to be looked at into.
Yeah, I've lost the sound there.
Yeah, sorry, you're back again. You keep going off, Fiona, and then back
But I
again.
thought it was me.
No.
Me. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it,
Maybe Eleanor, I don't know if you wanted to kind of jump in there.
I think that the importance about this discussion is that it's not, that caring is not a female thing. And also, I think one of the other really key distinctions is that while lots of people don't have children, and in you know, my generation, nearly a third of university educated women of our kind of noon lot, 45 to 60, don't have children. And I think they're always assuming that, you know, women in work have issues because they have children is a really dangerous thing. And it's one of the things which a lot of the women who don't have children find really irritating, that they get kind of put in a bucket with other women who do have, you know, who have childcare responsibilities. But I also think that something that's really important as a distinction is that while not all of us have children, all of us are children and have caring responsibilities towards our parents. And so I think that there's a kind of there's an equality across both sexes and across the child free as well as people with child rearing responsibilities on this, talking about the caring issue, because we all have caring responsibilities as human beings who have parents. So I think that that's a really kind of key distinction. And I also think that these issues which had been seen as female issues are now, for the generation, that for the millennials, and, you know, I'm definitely for the Gen Z, but the millennials now all beginning to become parents. I've got siblings who are 12, 15 years younger than me, and I can see that. But the men in that generation are much more like the women were in mine, where, you know, my brother was the first person at his law firm to take paternity leave. He took 3 months off. And I found that as a senior manager, I was often having conversations with younger men, which were like the conversations that I had with women when I was having my own children. And they knew that I was a more senior woman who'd got a big job, but had also managed to be a mother. And they really wanted to know kind of how we did it. So I think that there's a really interesting conversation now that, and it's very important, this caring piece is not just put on women. And I think that a really key part of equality and feminism and any kind of inclusion is seeing us all as carers and making it clear to the next generation that men have to do caring too, in the same way that women now go to work, that this is a human responsibility, not a female one. That drives me mad.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's, you know, that the responsibility should be shared, of course. It's just that it's, I suppose when we're talking about the burden of care currently, that the stats don't lie, do they? I mean, the data does suggest that it's, you know, a real key driver in inequality and women. But you're right.
It definitely is in female
shaping the conversation, right? Yeah.
But my favourite statistic from the pandemic my favourite statistic from the pandemic is that the only households in which men did 50% of the unpaid labour were the ones where women were the main breadwinner.
Mm.
Can I jump in there as well? Can I just add something on that topic, if you don't mind? Because as an occupational psychologist, my business was to work alongside human resources, human HR directors, HR people, constantly. So I've spent nearly 30 years in an HR sort of environment, and I think that the pandemic is going to give human resources a whole different business model. They need to have a whole different business model. And they've been forced into that change already because, first of all, the pandemic hit and all of HR then had to say, what do? We've got buildings, we've got people that, they had to bring in policies, procedures for people working from home. I have a granddaughter who's got health conditions. They had to put her needs into consideration. What does she need? She can't come into the office. Now Boris has said, we're all back into the office. So everybody's going back into the office. So the HR are like, okay, let's reverse it and get everybody back into the office. But I think if they just stop still a minute and just look at it, they can incorporate holistically the 360 degrees of this very issue. And they can say, okay, this is what the shape of the world now looks like. And it's totally different to how it was 2-3 years ago, where HR was about, all the different things that come under HR. I'm not going to list them. But mainly, as you say, Eleanor, mental health has come into play, hugely mental health because of the pandemic. So they're more open to that, I believe. Hopefully they are. So I think they need to then look at building in the unpaid carers role into where do you fit in our model, and more importantly, what can we as a company do to incorporate that and help you? That's my feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm slightly conscious of time, but I think that's potentially there's so much more we could discuss and continue to do so. But I don't know if there are any questions that from the people in the presentation. I'm not sure what the best way to do that is. If Leslie can help us with that.
Yeah, I was quietly in the background, loving all that you guys were saying and enjoying not speaking for a change. Anyone who has any questions, please either feel free to come off mute or show yourself on camera or simply put something in chat. We have a fantastic panel here with lots of experience, and I'm sure would love some questions. Tough or easy. So please, happy to share any comments. Or any comments from the panel if we're waiting a little bit.
I think it's been a really, really good discussion, and everybody, has got, everyone's quite clearly passionate about, making change in this specific area because of a personal experience mostly. I think that what we're trying to see, or what we're hopeful that we will see in future, is that, we always talk about companions that, HR departments and businesses, we feel like what they want to support people. So we're starting to work with a lot of charities who are also trying to change the story on people, living with cancer, for example, or people dealing with mental health issues. And we feel like people do want to help, but they just don't know quite how and how to have the conversation. When you're at work and you're leading teams, it's busy, and you don't necessarily notice that somebody's going through something. And when they do, you don't quite know how to address it. So our hope is that in future, people feel that they can talk to people and that they can have a conversation and be helpful and know what to say back, because it can be a difficult conversation sometimes when somebody opens up to you, especially depending on your personality type. You might not feel that you want to have that conversation. So it can be challenging. So educating people in that space to know what to say. If you're a leader or if you're in HR, HR teams are generally very good at it. And then to have the options, and hopefully one day in the future that means that people can, or big companies can provide subsidized options for people to make sure that they can make it into work, which means that they don't fall off the equity ladder, whether they're women or men, because they've got family responsibilities and they're being a good human being shouldn't mean that they should fall behind at work. So that's what we are trying to, at the moment, speak to companions, speak to HR company with HR teams within companies at the moment to start those conversations and help people to subsidize companions or whoever it is to make sure that it's available so that people can make it in and carry on working and being a good person, whether it's children or elderly people or their sisters who are poorly or whatever the case is.
I think that's absolutely right, Lisa. And in that situation where I was torn between going to work and Melvin having that fall and being taken to hospital, if I'd have known about companions then, because I had nobody that I could call upon to say, whatever, but if companions, if I could pick up my phone and see that an app was in the pool area, even though I didn't know that person, I would have booked a companion and just said, can you go, would you be prepared to go into the hospital, sit with Melvin, so he's at least got somebody there for a couple of hours, and then I'll ring you and you can sort of report to me, because I need to physically see him to see what conditions he's in. And I had nobody, I had no family, there was nobody to call and say, can you just go and do that for me? But if that happened now and companions were there, I'd have no hesitation in finding a local companion in the pool area and saying, look, could you just please go into the hospital, find out what the situation is, stay with him for a couple of hours until I can get there.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got a job to do on marketing to make people more aware that companions is available. I can see somebody put in the chat now about how we're going to expand, and we're nationwide at the moment in the UK, but we're going to be expanding out. We're just doing an investment round at the moment, so we'll be having some more marketing budget. But if you want to get us in contact with us after this, we can see if we can help you in your area as well. We're getting companions coming on board all the time, all throughout the UK, so we can help you to find somebody in your area regardless of where you are. So maybe if you can connect with us after, then we can see if there's companions to help in your area.
Absolutely, we can.
So I'm just going to jump to that. Appropriately, given the subject of this conversation, I've actually got to leave because I've got a caring responsibility of my own, which is kicking off at 8. So I hope you'll forgive me. And it's been a really interesting discussion.
And, thank you, Ellen, for joining. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Eleanor.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Did you want to pick up the question, John, or maybe it's one for Fiona or one of the group where? Is it Arlette, if I've pronounced your name correctly? Where can people find out their rights as a carer within the workplace?
Yeah, that's right.
Standard policies, or is it down to each employer?
I mean, well, let me just take that as not on behalf of any specific employer, but when you go into any company, you should be given all of the policies and know where they are and where you can get them. And if you don't have that, you should also know where you can find them. So it's either HR or manager. I mean, again, Dorothy, I don't know how you advise companies to do it, but that's been my experience with any company I've worked in. Whether or not there'll be a policy that tells you is a separate question, but that's where the route would be to go get it. And managers will need to be more plugged into these things, actually, not just parent stuff, rather than just leaving the burden with HR, because invariably, our departments are changing to be sort of talent management, recruitment, you name it, and therefore there's a risk of these things being passed around to be nobody's responsibility. And hence the manager is always on point to be there for the team person in conjunction with HR.
Yeah, and we've had a comment in the chat around very few companies offer kind of paid carers leave. So I think to your point, Fiona, making sure that you are looking in the right places. So it's brilliant advice, and of course speaking to your local authority I think is important as well. Dorothy, I know that you were in the House of Lords speaking about the rights of unpaid carers. So, I'd love for you to help that person with that question, because I know you will have so much more experience than me in terms of outside of employment, where to go if you are an unpaid carer.
Yeah, John, it's a minefield. I'm not going to lie to you, and it doesn't seem to get any easier. But if you feel that you're caring for someone, or you need time off to care for somebody, and you are caring for somebody, if you're in employment, Fiona said there's often a difference between management, on ground level, and that's HR's responsibility. But I think from HR perspective, when you join a company, when you're in a company, it should be part of the induction. Whether that's induction is done by human resources or the induction is done by the manager, on the shop floor, it doesn't matter. It should become part of the induction, and this is what our policy is around that. Externally, well, there's Carers UK. They are the professional group that look after all unpaid carers, and you can find their number, and they have a helpline and you can ring them. In Bristol, we also have our own local carers centre. They're also very helpful. Or ring up your local social services and say, I'm caring for someone. You will have to be assessed. We go through assessments every single year. And even though I've been doing it for years, that doesn't alter. And the fact it's progressive and not going to get better, we still have to go through an assessment. So you will have to go through assessment from, if you want looking to get carers assessment and carers pay. But yeah, those are the four places: within work, your line manager or HR; outside of work, Carers UK, your local carers group, or your local government social services.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, if there's no more questions, I suppose the only thing left to say from my perspective is thank you. Thank you so much, Dorothy, Lisa, Fiona. I only wish we had more time, really, because I think that there's so much more that we could have talked about with all of you. So thank you, and I hope we can do it again. And thank you to Restless and for everyone for joining and asking questions. I hope it was helpful. We hope it added some value, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Brilliant.
I just want to say
thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to say that since Companions have come online, we don't feel alone now. So we don't feel that we're completely alone. We feel like we've got a little family here with Companions. So thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dorothy.